have to have a 5/8 inch lift on my left shoe to compensate for the length or extension that the doctor put me through when I had the first hip replacement. And when you have a lift on your shoe, the thicker the lift, the less flexibility your shoe has, so you have to pick it up and you have to set it down. And what that does is that helps twist and bend your body and contort it so that you're doing more harm than you're doing good. And this was going on for a long period of time, years before I had the hip replacement, as I progressively got worse and worse. Okay, I went and I asked for advice. What do I do now? I don't know if I contacted the Department of Labor and Industry or who I talked to. I said, what are my options? And they said, you can do an appeal or a petition to vacate. And I didn't know what a petition to vacate was, but anyhow, I called different attorneys and I told them my situation, and they asked who was the attorney, and they got all upset. Well, that attorney's had problems in the past, and we don't want nothing to do with him. We don't want anything to do with your case. You got screwed. Your case is too screwed up. The state only gives you 30 days to do an appeal from the time that you get a decision. Now, investigations can take years, but when the state can take years to do an investigation. The Department of Human Rights can take a long time to do an investigation, but they only give you 30 days to appeal, which I think is wrong. The laws need to be changed. So anyhow, I was calling these attorneys and they didn't want anything to do with the case. They didn't want to be involved with my ex-attorney. They knew his reputation versus their reputation. So I got more depressed. I went from anxiety to stress to depression. And I still suffer from depression 20 years later. So anyhow, I did the appeal myself, and in an appeals process in the state of Minnesota, which is asinine, you cannot enter into evidence anything that wasn't entered the first time, which was basically nothing. The judges were appalled at what I was telling them. I told the judges at one point, the opposing attorney did come to the job site, did interview 2 people, and he asked them 2 questions and what the response was. And the judges asked that attorney, did you do that? And he said yes, but they didn't allow that information. So after I did the appeal, and of course it went against me again, the company was having a heyday because they won the work comp decision. They were vindicated. With all the problems that they've had in the past and violations of laws, and let's not involve OSHA, about carbon monoxide levels, so on and so forth. I filed a complaint with the Department of Human Rights with a complaint of harassment by disability. And I filled out the forms. It took them a long time to do the investigation. They talked to people that were supposed to come to my work comp hearing. They had the same list, and their findings were, in talking with those people, that I was not only harassed by disability, but I was threatened with physical violence. A supervisor had taken a knife out of his pocket and says, well, let's not wait for you to have the operation, let's just do it right now. I ended up working there, and the harassment continued and continued. The depression and stress got worse and worse. My leg got worse and worse until the femoral head was slipping out of the socket, and I could push it back in by hand or roll on the floor and pop it back in. It wouldn't come all the way out, but you know, it was coming out, and people could hear it when I did it. I had the operation. The doctor said I was fine. Of course, I wasn't. Another doctor found out that one leg was longer than the other one. I had a lift on my shoe for years. I ended up where I was having problems working, and most of it was seasonal work. When the first doctor, orthopedic surgeon, after he had done the surgery, he had written a note for me to go back to work with some restrictions and limitations. And I took it to my warehouse supervisor. The warehouse supervisor directed me to personnel. Personnel said, we don't have a job for you, and I have a witness to that. That was not introduced at any point in time. So I ended up losing jobs because of the problems I was having with the first implant, all the medications. I ended up homeless because my wife divorced me for various reasons. The injury had a lot to do with it, money, what I could and couldn't do, my attitude, my stress, my depression. I ended up homeless and getting kicked out of my apartment after I moved out from where I lived with my ex-wife. And I ended up in a Minnesota Veterans Home. They put me on a non-service disability pension fund. It took 5 months for it to go through. And it was $836 a month. When you're in the Veterans Home, in the state of Minnesota, they take 95% of your income. So whatever was left over every month is what I had to live on. They supplied the meals and the bed and the TV and some small activities and small tiny work programs where you only make $5 an hour cash, but it's not even 20 hours a week. While I was at the Vets Home, I was going up to the VA Medical Center with problems about my artificial hip and the lift on my shoe, so on and so forth. They did a lot of various tests, steroids, dyes with x-rays, different types of medication. I wasn't getting any better. I called the VA Medical Center to go back and have more procedures done, and the VA Medical Center wouldn't return my calls. I had a social worker at the Vets Home. She called the VA Medical Center. They wouldn't return her calls. The Veterans Home has a staff meeting about every residence I think once a month or once every 2 months, something like that. And in my case, because of my situation and all the things that had been done to me and the VA not returning anybody's calls, they found that with my low income, I qualified for Minnesota Care. My social worker, Amy Broughton, had it all set up. I called Minnesota. So I called Minnesota Care. They said that they had talked with my social worker and I qualified for Minnesota Care. They told me about the different programs. I picked a program through Medica, their cheapest medical program. And I called Meadowbrook Clinic or Methodist Hospital. I told them my situation. I said I want to see the orthopedic surgeon that found out that I had one leg longer than the other one, and they said he was retired, and I said I want to see your best orthopedic surgeon. They set it all up. I went in to see him, and before I went to see him, I got my medical records from the VA Medical Center, which were about that thick. And I brought him to that doctor, and that doctor said he had talked with the doctor that had found out one leg was longer than the other one, but he was retired, but both of them played golf, so they reviewed my case, and this new surgeon had worked up at the VA Medical Center teaching students from the University of Minnesota. He says, I know how they operate up there. And he was just paging through all this information, but he didn't stop on any certain page, and he said, all this is unnecessary. He says they should have done a bone scan. And he also said, do you feel like a guinea pig? And I said, you're pretty close. I feel like a lab rat. He ordered the bone scan. I went in and did it. When the results came back, the doctor called me in, and he says, here's your problem. And he showed me an x-ray, and the prosthetic inside of me from the hip socket down in the bone in my leg was all black. He says, your body's been rejecting this ever since they put it in. You had the wrong type of implant put in. He says, I'm an orthopedic mechanic, and he says, I'm gonna put the best possible part in you